Good morning, everyone. It's Friday, March the 27th, and welcome to 7Investing Live. This is our live stream event we host every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time to spotlight and showcase several of the stock market's most intriguing opportunities. You can see all of our long-term recommendations and our actual stocks and best buys each and every month at 7investing.com. If you'd like to sign up, you get your first 7 days absolutely free. You can check that out at 7investing.com/subscribe. My name is Simon Erickson. I'm the founder of 7Investing. I'm joined by Heather Horton. We've been for the last two shows on the first two of a three-part series showcasing the MIT Tech Review's 10 breakthrough technologies for 2026. This is an event that I've been a fan of. They put out the list for several years. I followed it closely for the last decade. It's basically the scientific innovations that they think are going to have an outsized impact on society at large. And we've taken that here in these last couple of shows to take it one step further and say, of those scientific innovations, which do we think are the most intriguing for investors? Keeping in mind, sometimes scientific innovations are really cool things. They could be academic studies, but they might be smaller scale and commercial nature. We're going after the ones that have been the really big commercial hits and the ones that investors can make tens of billions of dollars on for the companies that are implementing them. And so a quick recap of where we've been and where we're going today. And first, in the first part of the show, we looked at the last 3 years of the breakthrough technologies for 2023, 2024, and 2025. In part two of the show, which we filmed on Wednesday, we looked at the list of 2026, and we forced ranked those 10 technologies based on what I interpreted to subjectively be the most investable, from number 10 to number 1. And then on today's show, we're going to take 3 companies out of those most investable of the technologies and actually put a little bit of a deeper dive, a magnifying glass on them, see if we can figure out what they are specifically doing and if they might be opportunities for investors. And so once again, I'm going to jump into a presentation this time. Normally I have more of a free flowing conversation, but these have been a little bit more structured here recently. I am going to go ahead and show where we've been in the last couple of shows, and then where we are with those 3 technologies today and the 3 companies we'll be discussing. And by the way, those 3 companies will be Broadcom, as I blank for a moment, Lumentum, and then NuScale Power will be the third. We're going to jump into those in a moment here, but let's really quickly review where we've been so far. Here are the 10 breakthrough technologies that we had from previous years. You can hopefully see them in the screen there. You've got now 10 of them from 2023, 10 of them from 2024, and then 10 of them from 2025. We then moved on and said, out of those, we thought that AI for everything, AI for image generation, RISC-V chips, weight loss drugs, chiplets, robotaxis, small language models, and generative AI search were the ones, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, the 8 technologies that we thought had the most commercial appeal and the most investing appeal for those that wanted a publicly traded company to invest in. We then went on and looked at the list for 2026, and we said that generative coding, hyperscale AI data centers, and next generation nuclear were probably the 3 of this year's list that had the most appeal for investors. And so we're going to double click on those 3 right now and see if we can find some opportunities, being that this is an investor show for an investor audience, of some publicly traded companies that might be very intriguing. Okay, and then moving on, instead of 3, I'm actually going to kind of limit that down to 2. I think the generative coding kind of goes into the same thing as the AI data centers, so we're really going to focus on 2 of those, being the generative coding is powered by AI data centers, and the AI models that they're running out there. So let's look at the AI data centers. Let's look at next generation nuclear. Again, I'm going to focus on 3 companies that are actively implementing these technologies, bringing them live in the world around us. And the first, within that hyperscale data center bucket, one of the 10 technologies we talked about there, I'm going to highlight Broadcom. The ticker on Broadcom is AVGO, previously AVGO, previously Hewlett-Packard's Analog Chips Group from back in the 1960s. But this is a company that has amassed now an empire of semiconductor intellectual property. I call this one the central architect of the modern AI data center, which of course is perfect for the breakthrough technology that is hyperscale data centers, as spelled out by MIT Tech Review. And so what Broadcom is doing, it's unleashing its IP empire to create the future of AI. There's a lot of things going on in AI data center that cost $40 billion or more to build today. The graphic on the right-hand side is out of one of their presentations, or investor presentations. You can see all of the complexity of what's actually going on within a data center, right? Each one of those kind of boxes, if you see it, is a server rack. Those are the server racks. You always see the lines of them, the whole hallways worth of data centers. You can kind of see there's central processing units that are going off of them. Kind of hard to see this. I apologize that it's a little bit harder to see there. But then you've got custom processors within them as well, right? TPUs, XPUs, whatever they are, that are supporting the TPUs within the racks. You need to have switching to direct the traffic within the data server itself. Who's going to be receiving which information? Where's the other information going? You need to have a switching data cop, a traffic cop, in the middle of each one of those servers. You then kind of push them up to the top of rack servers as well. You've got a leaf and spine configuration, so you don't just have one server that's doing all of the processing. In fact, the largest supercomputers now have got 100,000 of NVIDIA's GPUs installed in them. You can't just do that with one single server rack. You've got to have lots and lots of them split over kind of these large server racks that are then connected in the center. And there's networking that goes on between them, and then there's also switching, and then there's also communication with the external world. So you've got processors executing tasks. You've got switches that are directing server traffic. You've got networking cards that are communicating with the outside world. There's a lot of technologies going on in there. And in that graphic, if you're watching this live, anything that is marked in red is something that Broadcom is selling today. They are an empire of semiconductor intellectual property. And in fact, they're generating $64 billion a year in revenue. That was up 24% year over year. They have 10,000 customers, 24 internal divisions, and are spending $11 billion a year on R&D and have 19,000 patents. This is an absolutely massive company. $1.5 trillion market cap. But again, because of the power consumption, because of the complexity, and because of the united ecosystem of a data center, you have to have a go-to guy. You have to have a one-stop shop that you're going to and saying, Broadcom, look, we're ready to build a data center. We're ready to go. We want this to get done as quickly as possible. How much of this can you take care of us for us? And how much of this can we get a volume discount on? That's what Broadcom is playing in the world today, the central architect of the modern AI data center. And then internally, they've got a goal of just their AI product division. Again, there's 24 internal divisions. This would be one of those 24. They have an internal goal of just this AI product division generating revenues of between $90 billion and $120 billion by the year 2030. By my math, that's only 4 years out, and that number is at least 50% higher than Broadcom's total annual revenues that they have today, showing you the sheer scale, again, of how large these hyperscale data centers truly are, and why Broadcom seems very well poised to take advantage of a diverse set of opportunities. Heather, I will take a break and have a drink of coffee on this. Is there anything that you'd like to point out about Broadcom, knowing that we've talked about this on quite a few shows here recently?
Help if I am muted. There we go. So we've talked before about Broadcom designing chips themselves, right? Like custom chips for people, the way that so they can make the exact chips that people need instead of companies using NVIDIA's or AMD's chips. Is that correct?
That is. Broadcom's one of the best designers of ASICs, which are, you want to design your own custom chip rather than just use something off the shelf from NVIDIA or AMD.
Perfect. And so is the benefit, so I'm going a little off, but is the benefit of that is that companies are getting exactly what they need for these massive hyperscale data centers? Are they getting able to get more efficient chips and get exactly what they need for the data center? Are they using those Broadcom special designs for this?
Absolutely. That's a perfect question. And yes, the answer is yes. The quintessential example was years back, Google was building out its own data centers, and it was using it for training and inference for AI. Anything that was going through TensorFlow, they needed to do the number crunching for. And a lot of this was simple matrix math, right? If you look at kind of how these AI models work, it's kind of like a specific operation that they wanted to do that as efficiently as possible, because efficiently in data center world means less power, and less power means less cost. And so Google worked with Broadcom to design the tensor processing unit, the TPU, and then they started deploying these everywhere, every time that Google was building out its own internal data centers. They've now actually made it where they've got an agreement where the TPUs can be sold externally to other customers. And Anthropic, because they are doing very similar operations for machine learning inference like Google was, has now placed, get this, orders for $21 billion of future TPUs. That is absolutely, I mean, look at $64 billion total in revenue last year. Now this one customer has placed orders that are 1/3 of the previous year's total sales. So exactly like you said, how the custom processors do something very, very specific. NVIDIA can do that too, but if you know exactly what you want, Broadcom can help you do that.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Wow. A single order for 1/3 of their revenue. Okay.
They're massive. This is a big one. Broadcom is definitely a leader. I think if there's one company that's going to benefit the most from hyperscale data centers, it's Broadcom. But I want to jump into number 2, because this is a huge company, right? We said $1.5 trillion. Let's look at a small cap company that might be off the radar of a lot of investors that is also going to benefit from this breakthrough technology. And that's Lumentum. I wanted to focus on this one a little bit. This is one that I'm a little bit new to. It has been going gangbusters here in 2026. Anyone who's followed the stock price has seen, a multi-bagger return just in the couple of months of this year. But why? What is Lumentum doing that's so neat? I'm calling this a niche leader with an important innovation. And so what Lumentum does, which the ticker on that is LITE, for anyone who wants to follow along with this one, is they are producing and selling the laser transceivers and receivers that convert electrical signals into optical signals. And this is useful for sending data across a data center by transmission over fiber optics. This was a huge deal for the telecom companies of the late 1990s. They started laying fiber optic cables. You remember when it was fiber internet? That was such a big deal. And all of a sudden we had these small fiber cables that could even go subsea, could even actually connect the internets of the North America through Europe because fiber optics made it possible. But fiber optics are not sending electrical signals like a copper wire is. They're sending light signals, optical signals. And so you have to have something that can convert an electrical signal from a semiconductor, from an integrated circuit, into an optical signal, and then send that much more quickly and much more efficiently. Why would you do that? Well, because fiber optics are much, much more efficient than copper wiring when it comes to sending information. In fact, we write here, this is necessary for GPU computing in parallel. It eliminates the networking bottlenecks and reduces the power consumption. Here's a neat analogy that I saw and across the internet. I don't know where I found it up, but I love the example here is, say that you want to talk to your friend across the dinner table, and it's just a 4-person dinner table. You could probably talk to them just like this. Heather, how's it going? Wanted to tell you about the cool stuff that's going on with laser transceivers right now. But now let's say that we're in a kind of a crowded banquet hall, and now we're at a 20-person table, but I still want to talk to Heather, and she's on the other side of the table. I now have to kind of scream, hey, Heather, let me tell you about what's going on. It's really exciting. She can still hear me, but I'm using a lot more power in my voice, and it might not get to her as efficiently as before. And now all of a sudden, imagine that Heather and I are on the opposite sides of a football field, and I'm having to scream at the top of my lungs with as much power as I possibly can, and she might just barely even be able to hear what I'm saying in the first place. That's what copper wiring is doing. And again, because we've now got data centers that have got hundreds of thousands of GPUs that are all communicating with one another and trying to execute these tasks in parallel, you don't want to be building larger and larger copper cables that have got more and more heat generation that is turning into inefficiencies. You want to have that communication as perfect as possible, which is why as data centers are getting larger, there's more and more of a need for optical signal transmission. And this is where Lumentum is perfect for this. The transceivers are turning that information from electrical signals into optical signals, and the receivers are doing exactly the opposite. The other interesting thing about Lumentum is they're a key partner with NVIDIA. NVIDIA, of course, is working with a lot of these cloud providers to build the entire AI platform that are using their chips, that are using the NVIDIA GPUs. When they do that, they go out and they have their key partners, the key vendors of choice, like Lumentum, that they'll be building alongside, so that when you go, you're not just buying NVIDIA's chips, you're buying the whole package based on the key partners you want to work with. And so to keep up, Lumentum is now building a new production facility just to keep up with the demand from this kind of partnership. That's why you've seen the stock price going gangbusters. Generally good when you're partnering with the largest company that is the number one in the S&P 500 that is aggressively building new data centers, or at least the computing that's going into new data centers. And then even Lumentum, who most people never even heard of this company 3 years ago, is now all of a sudden part of the S&P 500, the 500 most valuable companies in the American stock market as of this most recent month. And so still, look at the size of this company. $1.6 billion in revenue, up 65% year over year. I actually think that's going to accelerate. 65% revenue growth rate is really good, but I actually think with this partnership and the speed of things, of how things are going, I think you're actually going to see that tick up quite significantly in the next year or the next several quarters. And then that 25% operating margin, you simply do not see very many companies that go from an 8% operating margin to a 25% operating margin within a single year. Incredibly how profitable this is getting at scale. This is a company that's got a neat technology, a niche leader with an important innovation that, man, it is hitting the hockey stick of growth right now, especially thanks to NVIDIA being so aggressive.
They were the ones that they're building it. They have the on-chip converters, which was far more efficient, correct?
That's right. You want to get as close to that GPU as you possibly can. Exactly.
We talked about Lumentum a lot more on the Fiber Optics Boom to Bust show on February 27th. If anyone wants to check out more about Lumentum and we have a whole show about it. It's a really interesting technology, and I am surprised to hear they're already on the S&P 500 because, yeah, it's just such a quiet, under the radar company, and all of a sudden they're just exploding. But it makes sense because reducing heat and energy in a data center is one of the most important things that a data center can do, because that reduces cost, reduces electric and cooling costs. It's all very necessary for these hyperscale centers.
Absolutely. How do I find that episode, by the way, Heather? If I'm hearing what you're saying, I say, man, how do I go back and find that one that we talked about them? Oh, here we are.
Oh, if you go to youtube.com/@7investing/live, you can find them. You can find all of our old shows there.
There was a good one indeed. And one thing that I found as an investor doing this for the last 15 years, looking at growth style companies, time and time again, every time you have a trend like this, there are picks and shovel technology providers that are going to support the NVIDIAs of the world that are doing really big things, right? Before this, it was Tesla, and there was a lot of picks and shovels providers doing that. Before this, it was cloud computing. There's a lot of cool stuff that was helping out with that. And as investors, we are kind of hardwired, pun intended on that one, to really kind of feel like we've missed the boat on this, right? Like even with Lumentum, if you got in January, or even if you didn't get in January, you probably were saying, I missed it. Look at the stock gains. Look at how well it's done over the last couple of months. I'm out. I missed this one, obviously. I should have got in. And then it goes higher in February, and then now it's going higher in March. And it's always very hard to predict where the top is because nobody wants to get stuck holding the bag. But in my experience of 15 years as a growth style investor, more often than not, you are acting against yourself by saying, I'm not going to do this at all because I missed the boat. It's almost not worth it to just say, I'm out, I'm not going to do it. A lot of times these stocks will go for a lot higher than you expect that they will, because when there's momentum at their back, when institutions start getting interested, when you start seeing the comfort level rising of the big money into small companies like this, it can continue for a long time. And so I would say, it's hard to tell where Lumentum is. I believe it's now a $40 billion market cap, whatever it is at right now. But that's not to say it can't go higher, especially with the wind at its back like we've seen here recently. Thank you, NVIDIA, for Lumentum.
We both learned a lot from David Gardner and his investing style. And one of his maxims was winners keep winning. Mm-hmm. And it's true. And so it's, even though it is really hard to feel like, I've missed this one, it's like, well, if it's winning so hard, get in when you can and watch it keep winning. And that has served me very well, because I'm really bad about that of like, I've missed this one. And it's like, no, just get in and watch it keep winning. And
perfect.
They do.
I agree. Let's look at one more, Heather. Let's look at the last one as we got a couple more minutes on the show. Let's shift gears from talking about data centers to talking about how much power those data centers need. And let's talk about a new form of energy that is providing a lot of that power, which is next generation nuclear. These are mini nuclear reactors that are kind of fit for purpose. Fit for purpose meaning they're not just pumping a ton of power onto the grid that's consumed by homes or businesses. It might be for a data center. It might be for an industrial plant. It might be something that needs a ton of power, and it needs to be operating 24/7, always available. And a lot of businesses look to solar and looked to wind power for this, but then the intermittency of a lot of those renewables just wasn't working out for them. You still had to store a lot of that in batteries. Nuclear doesn't have that same kind of limitation, but we know that we're all kind of scared of nuclear power plants pulling a Chernobyl out there. And then also just they're so expensive to build a really large nuclear power plant for industrial power production. They take years and years to build and billions of dollars. And no matter what your original estimate was going to be for them, it's probably going to be about 50% too low. They're very, very expensive. And they always overrun the costs. And so companies are out there saying, what if we could make a small modular reactor that can still be having a nuclear fission reaction, but it's not as massive as these massive plants we've had before. And so NuScale is one company that has done that. They have created the NuScale Power module. It is the very first and the only small modular reactor to receive design approvals, which they received twice, from the United States Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Only company that has this so far. And the modules themselves, as you can see over there on the right-hand side, about 75 feet tall. I mean, that's still pretty big, but compared to a traditional nuclear reactor, that's really small. There's 77 megawatts of power output per module. And a traditional nuclear power plant, aside from the really, really large ones, but a lot of nuclear power plants are about a gigawatt of power output. So 12 of these modules strung together, which they often do, they're not running in isolation, but you would kind of put 12 of them together to mimic what a nuclear power plant would look like. And based on the costs that we've seen so far, which again, they have not sold any of these yet. This is only in design right now. But based on the preliminary cost estimates, it would cost about $20 billion for 12 modules that would be an equivalent output of a traditional nuclear power plant. That's 1 gigawatt. Again, the advantages of these: 24/7 power generation, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It takes them about 36 months to construct, which is actually where NuScale stands today. I'll talk about that in a moment. Again, very, very small revenues today, but working on something much bigger right now. Safe and resilient. These are not the same. They've got, safety features out the wazoo on these things because they know that there's kind of a hesitance for nuclear power. They have it where no operator intervention could be used if you needed to shut it down. All of a sudden, there's anything that was out of spec or out of line of what they needed to be. They've really oversized the safety concerns for these. You can actually purchase through a PPA, a purchase agreement, prepaid purchase agreement from a customer that just wants the energy from it. It says, hey, just give me this much energy every month and I'll pay you for it. Or you can actually have the customer be the operator themselves, where they're actually on site. You've got engineers, you've got safety personnel that's actually operating these things, and NuScale could make it for them. And the levelized cost of energy is actually below traditional nuclear today, and it's closer to parity with natural gas combustion cycle, natural gas costs in terms of the dollars that you have to pay per megawatt hour of electricity or energy that's produced. The LCOE curve is something that in my past life we looked at a lot when we were looking at renewable energies. It was always natural gas was the standard you had to beat, and depending how expensive financing was at the time, you could always make a case for nuclear or renewable energies versus natural gas. But natural gas was kind of like the baseload power that was always available. It had emissions, it had other things that were a factor. The costs of goods were always a factor and things like this. But this was kind of always what you want to say. Can you be at parity with natural gas out there? And we're starting to see that nuclear, even in small modular reactors at about an 8% discount rate, is at parity right now with other forms of energy. And so NuScale is very small today, only $31 million with an M in annual revenue. That's actually flat year over year. It's mostly just licensing deals where they're kind of exploring the technologies and getting paid some for it. But they've got almost this lottery ticket of potential. If this hits, today's market cap is a fraction of what this company is worth as an investor. Let me tell you why. They've got a partnership right now, an exploratory partnership with a power producer called Intra One, which would provide the Tennessee Valley Authority with power, which is a 7-state region. This would be absolutely massive. Tennessee, of course, one of the largest power producing areas of the United States. They're exploring small modular nuclear. They have gotten an agreement in place that they will commit to up to 6 gigawatts of future power. It is non-binding legally, which means this is an option. It's not necessarily going to happen. But they've said, yes, we want to start exploring this. We're going to pay you along the line of reaching milestones as this agreement continues to progress, right? You can't just all of a sudden go out and say, hey, we're going to spend billions and billions of dollars and we're going to see if it works out. You say, hey, show me you can do part A, and then we'll get you to part B. And then part B, you go to part C until all of a sudden you've got a fully functional reactor. If this hits, The contract specifies up to 6 gigawatts of power production. Keeping in mind 1 gigawatt at current pricing today would be about a $20 billion project, which means altogether 6 gigawatts. Excuse me, I actually have this incorrectly written here. This should be 9 gigawatts, which would be $180 billion at total scale. Pardon the error in the slide that I had there, but this could be an absolutely massive project, right? 6 gigawatts on the low side, 9 gigawatts on the high side, between 120 and 180 billion dollars. Keeping in mind, NuScale's revenue last year was $31 million. I mean, if you actually start seeing progress in these milestones, this is an all-in where you can all of a sudden have one of the largest power producing regions in the United States teaming up with an early stage technology that is a fraction of what it possibly could. A lot has to happen between $31 million and $180 billion, but just to show you the magnitude of how large this could be and how there is interest out there with firm numbers in place for contracts, it's interesting to see NuScale catching on. And this is a technology that, as MIT lays out in their breakthrough technologies descriptions, could be world changing, especially for America's energy future.
This is one I'm so excited about. I think nuclear in general is just such a clean, great source of power. And we know what went wrong at Chernobyl. We would know what went wrong at Fukushima, 3 Mile Island. Like, we have safety in place. Obviously, things can continue to go wrong, but it's not like traditional forms of energy are very safe either. So nuclear is actually a very safe form of energy. And I think these are just such a fascinating move forward. I don't own NuScale yet, but it's definitely one I'm looking at. I didn't know about their partnership with TVA. That'll be an interesting one to watch. They have Oak Ridge down in the middle of TVA's area, so they already have some experience with nuclear processing down there.
Absolutely.
So that'll be great. Do you own NuScale?
I don't, and the stock has come back down quite a bit. There was a lot of enthusiasm. If you're following the stock price on this, in fact, maybe I can pull this down, stop sharing my screen if we wanted to pull up a stock chart or something on it. The ticker on NuScale is SMR. Heather, if you want to share that, we can talk a little about what's going on. Or I can just talk about it generally. I mean, there was a lot of optimism a couple of years ago when they got approved. Energy policy is state-based, and they got kind of spec'd in Idaho and in Utah were the first 2 projects. And then just because of budget overruns, they didn't have the financing available. It's getting more expensive. There was a change in America's energy policy, overall to focus a little bit more on fossil fuels. Those projects fell through. And so nuclear stock, as expected, if we expand it maybe out to 5 years, let's pull it up for 5 years and see how that looks. But, we're at $10.36 today. I mean, look at how it was hitting $50 or more, even just back in 2025. When you have projects that kind of don't work out, of course, the optimism in the market is going to retreat, right? We're going to get back out of this. But you're starting to see the momentum build a little bit more. These projects would be much larger than the ones in Utah and Idaho anyway. And then even in Romania, you've got RoPower that's already licensing a lot of their technologies and wants to scale this up as well. So it's going to be interesting to see what nuclear has got in its future. I think the NuScale is, in my opinion, kind of the front runner in this. The largest nuclear power plant in America is in Georgia. It was Georgia Power that commissioned the project. It's 4.5 gigawatts of combined output. It cost $35 billion. It's the largest power plant project America has ever spent money on. It was originally expected to cost $14 billion, so it more than doubled the original project cost. And of course, it's just very, very hard to operate a massive nuclear power plant of that size. Even if it's efficient in terms of the power being produced, just the manpower and all the work and all the safety and all the stuff, very, very difficult. It would be easier to have 12 modules that are small modular reactors that are each producing 1 gigawatt versus 4.5. So I think there's a lot of potential for this. You don't have to go out there and bet the farm on building this massive reactor and this massive power plant. You can actually kind of make these smaller fit for purpose ones. It's why SMRs are catching on in interest again here in 2026.
Yeah, they're definitely a place I'm excited about, and it's really cool to see MIT is pushing them as one of their top techs for this year too.
Yep. So that'll recap it. Again, this was the third part of our three-part series. We did focus on the 10 breakthrough technologies of 2026. Thank you to the MIT Tech Review for all the hospitality, both in person and then all the things that you publish that I think are fantastic. I always enjoy those. I like to showcase them for investors specifically as we kind of look at what are these neat scientific innovations and then who's actually going to commercially harness those, take advantage of them, and then where should investors be participating if we're long-term and patient enough to see them come to fruition. So those are the 10 2026 breakthrough technologies. Appreciate you for tuning in for this show. We're going to have a schedule of events again for April. I think we're going to focus a lot more on innovation and stuff like that. I really enjoyed these last three shows. I think maybe even take a couple more of those technologies on that list. Bring some guests in here in April. Look a little bit closer at healthcare. We do have one guest that's going to be scheduled to talk about Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, which has been out of favor here recently, but I think might be coming back into favor in the second half of the year. And of course, anything else you'd like us to talk about, send us a note there on our YouTube or on our Twitter page. We'd love to hear what topics you are interested in as well. My name is Simon Erickson. Appreciate for tuning in to today's show. We will see you again on Monday. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Talk to you again soon.